no matter what you do, be passionate, do what you like and what you enjoy, and you will likely succeed.
It's a hard journey, entrepreneurship. If you don't love it, don't do it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Mars Discovery District and welcome back to Entrepreneurship 101. If this is your first time with us, you are in the third lecture of the course, and we are pleased to have Allyson Hewitt and Kerri Golden, whom I'll introduce shortly. They're joining us to speak to different types of entrepreneurship, as well as what you need to be thinking about as you position your startup or your business idea in the marketplace. A warm welcome to our webcast participants, including our participants from our satellite center partners, literally joining us from all over Canada. It's a pleasure to have you joining us from all our partners, including at Haltech and NORCAT. Some of them have been here with us from last year. Most of them are new. If you are participating by webcast, we do encourage you to engage on the platform by sending questions through the Q&A widget that's at the bottom of the screen. There's also a chat room widget that will allow you to just network with other entrepreneurs in the space and get to know people a little better. And there's a feedback survey widget that will allow you to give us immediate feedback on the quality of the presentation. That's very important to us here. For those of you who are joining us, if you are interested in the slides from the lecture, in the video from the lecture, in post-event blogs, as well as other resources that are related to the lecture topic, all of that will be available within about 3 days after the lecture. So by Monday morning, Monday afternoon, everything will be up on the Mars website. Just a quick announcement about an event that we have coming up in the community. Toronto Life is hosting Entrepreneurship and Technology, the $100 million idea, here at Mars on October 21st. The key question around the event is how can high-tech ideas turn the city into a major international player? And it consists of, at the heart of it is a panel discussion with entrepreneurs and venture capitalists in the space, including Marcus Daniels from Extreme Startups, Daniel DeBow, who is the Senior VP at Salesforce, Jim Orlando, who is the MD at Omers Ventures, Mark Ruddock, who is the CEO at Wonga Canada, and Vicky Saunders, who is the founder of SheEO. If you register through the Mars website, there is access to a $10 discount on the ticket price. So anyone who is a member of the Mars community can participate at a discounted rate, which is fantastic for us. Before I introduce Allyson and Kerri, please take a minute to get to know the person who is next to you. Introduce yourself, say who you are, what industry you're currently working in, what industry your dream startup or your current startup idea is in, and if it's not in the same industry in which you're working, what do you need to make that leap? All right, you have 1 minute. So to introduce Kerri Golden and Allyson. Kerri Golden has been a general partner at Jolt Fund LLP, which is an investment fund with 23 micro-investments in early stage companies that are being mentored in the Jolt Accelerator program delivered at Mars. In 2014, she joined her sister as a financial and operating partner in a local business called Urban Flats Toronto, formerly Toronto Corporate Stays. Founded in 2009, the company offers fully furnished flat rentals for corporate customers and others who need temporary housing in downtown Toronto for 30 days or more. Kerri is also a volunteer advisor here at Mars, providing mentoring and advice to entrepreneurs in the ICT sector, and is a member of the OSC's Exempt Market Advisory Committee. Allyson Hewitt. Allyson is very fun. I get to sit not too far from her, and I hear the laughter from time to time. Allyson leads the Mars social innovation track, which now cuts across all the other venture services areas of Mars, ICTs, clean tech, and health tech. Her team works on a broad range of projects, from not-for-profits interested in revenue generation to entrepreneurs committed to social transformation. And I know firsthand that she's very passionate about that space. She brings considerable expertise in the public sector, including the introduction of 211 and several award-winning innovations to her role. Allyson comes to Mars from Sick Kids, where as executive director of Sick Kids Canada, she was an advocate for child safety. And prior to that, she was Executive Director of Community Information Toronto, an agency that matches people with services. I've heard lots and lots of good things about Allyson and Kerri's presentations, and I'm very, very excited. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hello, we're really happy you made it. I noticed my friend here with the leaf sweater on. I hope we get you out of here in time to see the game, because, you know, we're competing with a lot of stuff here in the city. You had to walk down the escalator. They're not making it easy for you, but thank you for making the effort. Are you having fun at E101? Those that have been here before, yeah? Are you learning some stuff? Excellent. I just was following the Twitter board, and someone says, this is the easiest way to learn. I love that. We should make learning easy. So here's what Kerri and I are going to talk about today. We're going to take you through a little bit of a self-assessment. Is entrepreneurship really for you? You should figure that out, right, before you dedicate all this time to it. So we're going to start there. We're going to talk about some corporate options. We're going to take you all the way from charities through to for-profit businesses. Then we're going to talk about the different types of businesses that are out there, from consulting, services, products. We're going to talk a little bit about the sharing economy, scaling and profiles for business types, forms of financing, which may be interesting to some of you, I don't know, maybe financing for sure, and sources of financing, right? And Kerri and I are totally into interactive, so if you have a question right in the middle of what we're saying, you want to challenge us, we're really good with that. You don't have to wait right to the end, okay? And that goes for folks who are watching us online as well. So Kerri is going to kick us off with the self-assessment.
Great. Well, it's really glad to be back. It's always fun to do E101. I love watching and meeting people who are at the beginning of their journeys, and looking forward to hearing your questions and what you think about this. I think the first thing we want to talk about is, why do you want to start this business? What's your motivation for it? So how many people here want to start a business because they want to make a lot of money? And I'm in that group. As an owner of a business, I definitely do. And how many people want to start a business because they want to make some large change in some social issue?
Oh, you are.
Yay, we love you.
Love
and
you.
how many people want to do both?
Yay!
I am hoping it's most of you, because I really think you've got to be passionate about what you do, and you really need to ask yourself that question. I think the next question you need to ask is, do you actually have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? And some people do, and some people don't. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with not having it. You may want to work in an environmental or an entrepreneurial company because you enjoy the environment, but it doesn't mean you necessarily have to start and lead it. But it is something you want to ask yourself. And so risk profile is a very important thing. You're going to be on a very, 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 very steep roller coaster ride as an entrepreneur, and there's many ups and downs. And so you've got to think, am I prepared to do that? And I think from a lot of us, is it really something that deep inside us compels us to want to do that? The next thing you need to think about is, what resources do I need? Can I just get started at my kitchen table or in the basement or the garage? Or do I need people around me? And the picture is actually from our common working space up in the Mars Commons with a couple of the Jolt companies. And we see a really interesting dynamic when you're working in a co-working space. You may have others around you to bounce off ideas, just like you do here at Entrepreneurship 101. You may also feel that sense of competition, that there's a team beside you that's actually getting to their milestones, getting their product out, getting customer feedback, getting their first contract, and that spirit of competition can be a really, really great thing, right? I think the other last thing you need to do is, how do you fit in the rest of the world? Because you can have your idea on your planet, but how does that collide with everybody else in the ecosystem? Is your product or service unique? Has someone else tried this before? If they did they fail, and why? Just because they failed before doesn't mean it's not a good idea, but you really need to do your research on what you might change to make that idea actually executable this time around.
That's great. And I really wanted to echo what Kerri said. It's important to want to make money. It's a good thing to want to make money. The problem is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, what we've done is we've done a lot of surveys and research. And if that's your only motivation, when times get rough, you're going to walk away from it. You've got to be passionate about it. So the amount of people in the audience who are thinking about, how do I meet a social need or environmental need as well as making money, that's the sweet spot, and that's how we see the future around here. Anybody work at a not-for-profit, volunteer at a not-for-profit? Some of you? Great. So that's absolutely one of the corporate structures. There's also charities, which is a division of not-for-profits. Then, of course, there's the regular business. You go to incorporate as a for-profit business. That's what most folks know. Then there's cooperatives. Canada has a long history of cooperatives. Groups like Desjardins is a huge cooperative in the financial services sector, and something to think about as well. So we want to make sure that you're looking at a co-op as an option. And then we're playing around with this hybrid space. So for those of you that want to make money and make a difference, in the UK there's a corporate structure called KICs, or community interest companies, and it recognizes that you're for-profit, but your social mission is embedded into that. And British Columbia also launched this legislation called CCC, Community Contribution Company. Ontario's looking at it, and then elections happen, but they're looking at it. And Nova Scotia is also got legislation that's pending. So I think we'll see this more and more to reflect this hybrid space. Here's the old world. Hello, I am a nonprofit organization. I do very good work. Please give me money, write me a check, and go away. That's the old world. Hello, I am a business. Don't talk to me about social responsibility. I create jobs. What do you want from me, right? But what we're seeing is this pressure on both ends of the spectrum, where charities are going, I am so sick of being dependent on grants. And what happens is there's a policy change. Uh-oh, I didn't see that coming, and I'm really struggling. So they're beginning to do revenue generating activities, and this isn't actually new. Nonprofits and charities have been doing this for a long time. Think Goodwill, right? For a very long time. On the traditional business side, they used to just write a check to charity and say, okay, there you go do some good work. But now they're much more into corporate social responsibility, strategically aligned philanthropy tied to their business objectives. How do we, again, show that something like Bell Let's Talk, right? So you text, you guys all know this campaign with Clara Hughes and things. So that's all about texting, but it's about mental health. And of course, mental health is a huge challenge in this country, like any other country. So they're aligning their philanthropy strategically alongside meeting this constraint they have with their business and tying it to the philanthropic needs. And the space that we play in is this messy middle, where people are really beginning to think about how they do both. Are we mission first or are we money first? I don't know, but you gotta make those kind of decisions. And so you see groups like Restore. You guys know Habitat for Humanity, right? Really wonderful, not-for-profit charitable organization. But they get a lot of donations they can't use. So if you and I are renovating our kitchen, we can go to Restore and buy it. Artscape. This is another amazing Toronto-based organization that is absolutely seeing what happens in communities when artists go in. They regenerate communities. People come in, cost a lot more money, artists get moved out. Well, that's not exactly fair. So Artscape is buying these live-work spaces and really trying to value the work that artists do by creating these communities, but then keeping them in the community as they get gentrified. So that's some of the stuff that's happening on this side. I'm going to have Kerri talk a little bit about what's happening on the other side.
Right, so we have lots of businesses who obviously want to embed their social mission right in their business, even though they're very clear right from the get-go that they want to build a very scalable business, and they believe they can do that while doing good. A lot of times they may file for something called a B Corp status, which is a recognition that you meet certain criteria in the marketplace. And so a couple of examples of companies that we've had actually in Canada. So Bullfrog Power was one of the leaders in green power, and you may see them. You can see, I think, around Mars, sometimes some of the offices are powered by Bullfrog Power. And a couple of startups that are interesting. Raise Your Flag is a very passionate entrepreneur that believes that he can help solve youth unemployment problems, but also help employers find and train young people and show them meaningful career paths. And so it's an interesting statistic that only 45% of the population actually don't have any post-secondary education and have very good jobs right up through the chain in many companies. And it's something we really don't talk about. So he's built a platform in order to match young people with those careers.
That's great. Yeah, so moving right from the traditional charity like the Red Cross to traditional business like CIBC, and you can see how they're all blending together, right? You can see this happening, and we think it's going to happen more and more. Blurring is really the theme for us, and this is an example of a group of clean tech entrepreneurs and artists. So we brought the artists together with the clean tech entrepreneurs to do a display here at Mars, where instead of just writing out what technically they're doing as wonderful clean tech entrepreneurs, the artists were able to demonstrate that completely differently. So we do a lot of that messy space here, and you can see that we don't really care what sector you're from, but we really do care about the impact you'll have. Who's been to Evergreen Brickworks? Many of you. Jeff, if you're listening, most of them have been to Evergreen Brickworks. Great Belgian waffles. Great market. Does anybody have an idea what their annual revenue is? Anybody, just throw it out. $1 million? Keep going. 10 million, 10.8, almost 11 million. So how do they make this money? Well, about half of it, 5.2, is from donations, corporations, government, foundations, individual. About $1 million is in-kind, other kind of interest stuff. And 4.6 is from social enterprises, consulting, ticket sales, tenants. You want to hold your wedding there, you can hold your wedding there. Like, there's a lot of different things that you can do there. This is an organization that's leading in the social enterprise space. They're a nonprofit. They get grants and donations and all that other stuff that we're happy to talk about a lot more, but they understand they can't be grant dependent. They want to create their own income. They're almost half and half. So it's a really good example. On the social purpose business side, who knows Free the Children, the Kielburgers, right? You guys know, great. Okay, they have a for-profit arm called Me to We. You've probably seen these t-shirts all over the place or heard about their big We Days that they have or the trips that they have that they organize. 50% of the net proceeds go back to Free the Children. The other 50% is reinvested in the mission of the organization to bring it forward. And this is this B Corp thing that Kerri was talking about. So Bullfrog Power is a B Corp. It's like a set of ISO-like standards that you complete if you want people to know that you're actually serious about your social or environmental mission and not greenwashing, right? So you guys know the concept of greenwashing. You say you do all this stuff, but you don't actually do it. So this is an attempt to begin to address that. And in the US, it's actually a corporate structure. So remember we talked about nonprofits and for-profits? You can actually be a certified B Corp in the US, and we're looking at that as well. Okay? What that means is we're working with a variety of different lawyer groups to see what is the right kind of corporate structure that we need given the precedents and the other kind of constraints or opportunities we have in Canada. Yeah. The certification is in Canada. The incorporations, we have, and we'll talk about this I think a little bit later, but we have over 110 B Corps in Canada. Yes?
What constitutes social enterprise? I know you mentioned weddings. I think that would.
That's a great question, thank you. So the question was, what do you mean by social enterprise? Because a wedding isn't a social enterprise. So what that organization does, Jeff Cape is the founder. He started off greening playgrounds, planting trees in playgrounds. He wanted to sort of have a more greener kind of experience. He was given the opportunity to take over the brickworks, which is where almost all of the bricks were made for the city of Toronto. It's an ecological and environmental organization at its core, but they're free to generate revenue in support of the social mission. So if you think about a hospital, they have gift centers, right? They have parking lots. They generate the income in furtherance of their mission. So not every single thing they do has to support that, but the mission itself of the organization has to be ecological, environmental, social. Is that clear? Okay. Kerri.
Great. So we've got you thinking now whether you're a social entrepreneur or you're a capitalist. But let's now talk a little bit about the types of businesses you might start within each of those sectors. And so we'll start off with a consulting business. And obviously there's usually multiple participants. There can be a very, very, very diverse set of focuses in these companies. And they leverage essentially their core assets as people and the knowledge of their people to be able to serve a market and give really good advice. And so I'm sure most of you have heard of consulting companies like McKinsey or Bain and Deloitte. Obviously, some of the engineering firms like IBM and Hatch also have consulting divisions that do very, very well in scale. We also have a couple that operate here in Toronto that are on the social purpose side, Aperio and Purpose Capital, if you're interested in that space. One of the things about this model is there's oftentimes a very low cost to entry. So I can be an independent consultant, Allyson can be an independent consultant, you can be an independent consultant. And so there's not a lot of setup costs. I might need to buy a laptop and an iPhone and away I go. You obviously need to have some sort of specialized knowledge, expertise to be able to office service where someone's going to pay you for it. And some of the things you might want to think about, though, is carrying liability insurance. If you're giving advice to people, particularly on certain things, and for some reason it might go wrong, you really need to have some sort of protection for yourself if you're out there making your living in that particular environment. One of the challenges about consulting businesses is it can be very difficult to build and scale because they're really built around people. And so, you often will see smaller companies that get in and do a really good job in a niche oftentimes get swallowed up by large multinational consulting companies. Let's talk about the second type. Okay, so we'll talk about services. So it could be very simple. It could be a dog walking service. CIBC is obviously a generous sponsor here at E101, and banks, all of our banks obviously offer many services to their client base. We might also service other businesses. So Salesforce.com is probably one of the more successful companies that helps with client relationship management software with large, small charities, all of those needs. And there's a couple of local startups that you may have heard of or not heard of. FreshBooks is a fairly large Canadian company that's done very well out of Toronto. And they help a lot of freelance consultants from my last slide actually track and invoice and do the accounting and things for their businesses. And Post Beyond is currently a company that's here at Mars, and they're actually building a platform that helps large companies like Starbucks or others be able to use social media metrics for advocacy. So they will control messages that can go out from their employee base and engage the entire employee base in getting behind the brand and the company. So quite interesting. There is the online software as a service model. Post Beyond, FreshBooks, and Salesforce are all really good examples of that. So it's something you're using live online. And the challenge with these is to come up with a really compelling product. It can take you a long time. The costs may be high at the beginning. And then you also need to think about what you need from an infrastructure perspective to scale in terms of staff, support, et cetera.
So if you think about a service, a really traditional one is courier services, right? It's a pretty busy space, and I didn't even put up Canada Post. So you can see this is a pretty full space. But into that comes a bunch of social enterprises. Some of these are for-profit, and some of them are not for-profit. So Turnaround Couriers only hires youth out of shelters, right? They ride their bikes, and they deliver packages. The guy that runs it is a former McKinsey consultant, and his goal is to demonstrate that there's a real business model here. Away Express has been around for a very long time, and they work with people with mental health issues. And they will deliver packages using the subway system, using the TTC, using buses. And so if you're thinking about that, they're calling themselves a social purpose courier. Wording in this space is very challenging. That's why questions are great. And then over here is Goodfoot Courier, a relatively new entrant in the space, and they work with people with developmental delays or developmental disabilities. And they all are the new entrants into this very busy space, but they're reckoning that people will want to support them because they're interested in having their package delivered as long as it gets there on time. If they can also support a social mission, all the better.
The last type of company is a product company, and so some of the key characteristics is it's a tangible, physical thing, typically, consumer product, and so obviously Mr. Jobs, I think, has done a fantastic job of designing and marketing tablets and other great products that we all use today. Pharmaceuticals. Push is the last one that you may not recognize in the end. It's a Mars company as well, and they are about a wearable technology that can actually help measure the force, the strength you're using when you're lifting weights in order to help you avoid injury, and was founded by an engineer who actually had hurt himself, and while he was recovering, he researched there was really nothing out there for him. Some of the benefits and risks of this model: lots of development costs. Typically, you got to do a lot of testing. Think about a pharmaceutical company. By the time it makes it through all of the various trial phases, you could be in for multi-millions of dollars before you get to marketing. And you're also marketing to consumers, so that in itself is expensive, as you need to reach the Joe consumer, us, to find out about the product. Production costs can be high, outsource, but the potential for scale, if you get it right and you invented the iPhone, are huge. So that's why high risk, high reward sometimes. And I think Allyson's going to talk a little bit about some of the trends we're seeing.
So I just wanted to highlight a couple of products. I've already mentioned the Me to We one, but they make a lot of money doing this kind of space. So I want you to, if you're thinking about these kind of products that do good and make money, they can do both. It's actually not a contradiction in terms as we once thought it was. This one down here is a bowl by an organization called Sistering. And so they work with women who are homeless, women who are what they call street involved, and they run this pottery program. Now, I do a lot of public speaking in this space, and people like to give me gifts because they don't pay us. But I have a lot of these products, which I really like, so it works out well because they want to give me this kind of a gift. Ella's Soaps is another wonderful, organic, right, fair trade, all of that kind of stuff. And finally, for those that are really interested in this social enterprise space, either purchasing or learning more about it, the province has a website run by a community organization, and it's SE Ontario, so social enterprise, seontario.org, and I do hope you check it out if you're interested in this space. Who stayed in an Airbnb? Right. Bixi, or whatever the new name is. Bixi, anybody? Yeah. Auto share, any one of those kind of things. Like a few years ago, this was nowhere to be seen, right? This sharing economy or cooperative, collaborative consumption. We recognize that there's a lot of waste. We recognize there's a lot of opportunity to use things in a whole different way by going back to what we did, but by creating a whole new economy. So, Kerri's got this really interesting new venture that she's working on, and she'll tell you that hers is legal, whereas Airbnb, some questionable a little bit in certain circumstances. But this is like a whole innovation in the space, a whole innovation in how we develop products and services that wasn't on our registry at all only a few years ago.
All right, so bear with me for a second. I just want to set the stage for my next slide and share some Stats Canada figures with you. So they're kind of dry, but I just want to set the stage. So there's 1.1 million businesses in Canada that have a payroll account. There's actually another 1.3 million that don't, and they're probably independent consultants that don't have any people working for them. And I just wanted to show you an interesting chart because we obviously hear a lot in the startup community about these big, fast-growing companies, and everyone's attracting venture capital, when the reality is this. Really, the majority of the companies fall in this small and medium-sized business category here. And so that bottom part of the pie, worth almost 55%, is businesses in Canada that have 1 to 4 employees. And in the middle one, 4 to 100. And that really tiny piece of pie, there's 21,000 companies that actually have over 100 employees. And really, only 2,500 of those are over 500. So this is what the landscape looks like. I think it's a great landscape for you to think about as an entrepreneur. There's lots of room in Canada to grow much bigger, bolder companies. And we would challenge you to think about what that could be and do. But there's absolutely nothing wrong in being in those other buckets. And so the lifestyle business. And so if you're a part-time yoga instructor because you love yoga, absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's often a hobby of the owner. You could have a hobby that was kind of dispatch radios and be the founder of Twitter someday. So there's nothing to say that business couldn't grow large. But generally speaking, that's a business that you're going to do yourself, and you're really not going to have probably a lot of funding around you other than perhaps family or friends or someone else that's interested in yoga. In the middle, we always call the SMEs here in Canada often the engines of the economy. And so I'm going to talk actually about my sister's company that I invested in earlier this year and became an operating partner in. And so it was founded in 2009. We have 5+, and I say plus because we have a part-time marketing person, we have a part-time bookkeeper, we have a part-time website person, et cetera. It's profitable, has been almost from the get-go, growing 10 to 15% a year, and generates a very nice income for 2 people. Absolutely nothing wrong to be in that kind of company, but the likelihood of attracting capital into that company is largely going to come from either angels that like that space and want to see it grow, family, friends, et cetera. The last category is the growth company. So Hootsuite is obviously in the social media space out in Vancouver, absolutely on a rocket ship, just raised $60 million last week. Obviously, they started 1 year before Leanne started Urban Flats and have 500 employees and growing. They have 10 million users, and most impressively, they have got almost 3/4 of the Fortune 1000 as customers for their product. that is the scalable business that VCs are interested in and private equity. And so they did a study about a year and a half ago, and in Canada, there's only 13,000 of those companies in Canada. So think of one, love to hear about it from you, but as I say, absolutely nothing wrong in being in that middle category and making a great living for yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about, so we've talked about structures, we've talked about types of companies. Let's talk about maybe the types of financing you might be able to use. And so bootstrapping, you self-fund it, you use credit card, you reinvest all the profits for growth. And I have a startup that closed $1 million financing last year, bootstrapped themselves with $44,000 of credit card debt between two founders. And it's a great story. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They're two partners, and until they took that $1 million, they owned 100% of the business. So that's great. Crowdfunding is also now a very, very effective way for you to do two things. One, to raise the money to build your product, but number two, and maybe more importantly, is to test that product to see if it's something that consumers or businesses may be interested in buying from you. And so Indiegogo and Kickstarter are probably the two biggest. The Canadian company Matter and Form, who also works out of here at Mars, had raised almost $600,000 and was able to build their product, ship it, and then just closed a $2 million round earlier this year, obviously on much stronger metrics with those investors, because they already had sold just over 1,000, I think, units in pre-orders. And Pebble Watch, Eric was here actually just a couple of weeks ago. If you heard him speak, and obviously did 10 million on Kickstarter and is a super success with the Pebble Watch.
And crowdfunding is something that wasn't we didn't have crowdfunding on our slides when we started talking about this stuff, but obviously it's huge, and even in the social purpose space. So many of you may know we have a Center for Social Innovation here in Toronto, and they have a crowdfunding campaign or platform called Catalyst. And that organization, that platform actually just started over a year ago, and they funded 25 projects with over 1,000 backers and raised $125,000 over the course of 1 year. And they've learned quite a lot about what works and what doesn't work. And then we've also got an organization here called Give Effect, a Mars company, which also specializes in this charitable space. And there's tons of organizations and resources and directories that will help you figure out how you get a grant. How do you get money from a foundation? How do you get government funding, corporate sponsorship? And one of the ones that we use is something called Grant Connect, which is a part of Imagine Canada. So Imagine is a national organization that supports charities, and they have something called Grant Connect. The other thing I just don't want to lose is if you're a co-op or if you're thinking about another kind of way to get membership fees, like MEC, people probably know Mountain Equipment Co-op, that's a really good example of one, and people make money through the payment of their fees as well as giving you the ability to shop there, right? So that's a couple of other examples and emerging trends in this space. If you're going to go that way, you've got to be able to demonstrate your impact. Remember I did my little thing here, I said, here I'm a charity, I do good, give me money. Well, good luck with that. It's not going to happen anymore. You've got to be able to demonstrate how you have made a difference. So this is an example of an organization that some of you may know called Pathways to Education. Came out of Regent Park, again here in Toronto, where they worked with the Boston Consulting Group, who did a social return on investment analysis. Many of you know ROI. This is an SROI. And they were able to demonstrate for every dollar invested in Pathways, $24 was saved to the system. What does that mean? Well, people were getting jobs instead of being in prison. People put off having children earlier so they could complete their education, and so on, and so on, and so on. And there's very clear metrics that groups like BCG can do to apply to this. You don't have to be this sophisticated, but you have to show, here's the current state, here's the ideal state, your theory of change is what you're going to do, what actions you're going to take to move to that ideal state. You've got to be able to show some level of attribution. You made a difference. And if you can do that, you're much more likely to get grants and other types of funding.
Number we're going to talk a little bit about debt and equity, which is obviously the other sources of money to build your business. Debt gets paid back first before you get any dividends. It's usually secured by assets, so that's why a lot of startups, especially those startups from first-time entrepreneurs or young people who may not have significant assets, may not happen. And once it's repaid, obviously with whatever interest or coupon that's on it, the lender doesn't get to participate in your business. From an equity perspective, though, it never has to be repaid. So but it does keep on paying forever in that any profits that are made with that business are shared as a partner, and your investor is your partner, generally for the long haul. So you want to think about who you're going to invite into your company as an investor and partner with. Just going to run you through a small example. So let's assume you need $40,000 to build and market a new app. You've got a grant because you have a social bent on this. And so the funding you need is actually $30K. So let's look at 3 scenarios. One where that ranks low on the chart and you make $10,000 from app downloads. One, it's a featured app, so you make $30K. And one where it really hits the top of the chart and you make $200,000. So in the debt side, in that downside scenario, the lender loses $20,000 and you get essentially zero out of it. But you may owe them the money back, depending if you've secured that loan with assets. In the next scenario, the lender's even, and plus their interest, let's assume, and you make zero. And in the last scenario, though, the lender's even, but you make $170K because you've kept all the equity for yourself. In the 50-50 partnership, the partner loses $25K in that first scenario, and you make $5 for your sweat. In the next one, the partner still loses, but you make $15K. And in the last scenario, the partner makes 70, 100 minus the 30 they invested, and you make 100. And so if you've obviously been successful in that last scenario as well, a granting agency would obviously report upon your success, and this would be a successful venture. So it's really about trying to understand the risk, the downside and upside risk of your business and every stage, and whether or not this makes sense for you to do debt or equity.
And for those of you that get this, brilliant. For those of you that don't get it, the slides are online, and you can sit with it for a second and go over it a couple of times, right?
Exactly.
Okay, what's happening this weekend? Like the holiday, what is it coming up? Thanksgiving. This is a really important principle that we like to call the turkey principle. You can get money from family, friends, and fools, but at some point you're going to have to sit around a table and have turkey with them. You got to be able to look them in the eye, right? So if you're going to take money from your friends, family, and fools, you may lose it, and you may have to eat turkey with them. So think about that as something that you're doing as you get into your venture. It's kind of a really important thing. Of course, there's traditional banks. They can give you lots of money. The problem is if you're in the charitable or nonprofit space, many banks are reluctant to lend to you because they're afraid to, quote, foreclose on God, which means if it's a shelter that's going after money from a bank and you don't make your payments and they've got to pull that away from you, they're a little bit reluctant to do that. So there are other organizations like the Community Forward Fund who understand this social purpose space a lot better and have a much more partnership kind of arrangement with you to make that happen. There are, again, lots of resources that we have on our site, like developing a financing strategy, the funding portal, which is an opportunity for you to find out about the bazillion government grants out there. There's a lot on the Mars Entrepreneurs Toolkit that I really hope you will take advantage of.
Right, and some of the other sources of funding, and this is typically once you've actually kind of crystallized your idea, you understand what the value proposition, and you've obviously gone through some more sessions here at Entrepreneurship 101, you might be ready to, and maybe have a working prototype of your product, or at least a very, very clear idea of how you're going to market with it. You could approach these types of groups. And so angels who are high net worth individuals, affectionately called by Allyson fools, but not all of us are. And we generally, though, like to invest in areas that we've worked in or that we're comfortable with, or perhaps we have a passion for and a social side. So kind of do your homework on angels. They can add valuable hands-on experience. A lot of times they are entrepreneurs who have run and built their own businesses previously, and they want to help the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I just put a little link there to the National Angel Capital Organization. Angels will sometimes invest as individuals, but sometimes in groups to mitigate risk, particularly at the beginning. So our Jolt Fund has 25 investors, including myself, who obviously have spread our risk across the 23 companies that we've invested in through Jolt, which is a good segue into accelerator programs. So we have a few of those in Toronto. Jolt and Extreme are the two main ones. And we also have a social impact one here at Mars called Impact 8 that rotates sort of its focus on companies it takes into the accelerator program. Usually there's a hands-on mentoring part of the program and education. It also comes with an investment for equity in your business typically as well. And then the final group, the venture capitalists, and remember back to my slide that says there's only that really small section of companies. I think VCs usually say they do 1% of the deals they see. They also invest at different stages. Some will do early stage, some will not be interested in your company until you've got the first $10 million of revenue and are looking for capital to scale beyond that point in time. So you, again, need to do your homework, and there's a link there to the Canadian Venture Capital Association, so you can check out what VCs operate in this market.
Okay, social finance is a whole new area of work. So how do we finance social purpose work differently? Yep, grants are super important, but how do we also think about opportunities for loans, debt, equity, et cetera, in this space? And this is a photo from the UK, obviously. The guy on the left is the father of venture capital in the UK, Sir Ronald Cohen, and they are absolutely global leaders in this space, and we have learned a lot from them. And we've set up something called the Mars Center for Impact Investing. So if you think about the old world, you'd reach into one pocket, you would give a donation, say to sick kids. Excuse me. You reach into your other pocket and you'd invest. Is there an opportunity to bring both those hands together and invest for social and or financial return? So this is not just negative screening, not just saying I don't want to invest in tobacco companies, but actually proactively investing in ventures that will give you a social and or environmental and financial return. So we have a portal here at Mars called the SVX, stands for Social Venture Connection. Used to stand for Social Venture Exchange, but because we are an exempt market dealer with the Ontario Securities Commission, they're not so thrilled with us using the word exchange. So we just call it SVX. And what happens here is that if you are an Ontario incorporated organization, either for-profit or not-for-profit, but you have to be around for at least 2 years, revenues greater than 50K but less than 25 million, audited financials, business plan, gone through one of those indicators like B Corps. There's other ones called GEARS or GIN. There's a whole listing of them. And if you've got a social or environmental sector focus looking to raise capital between 25,000 and 10 million, if you can go through all of those things, then we'd like to talk to you at the SVX, because we are building a whole community of impact investors looking for really good deals in ventures if you meet all those criteria. And coming up in November, we're going to host a social finance forum. We've been doing this since 2007. And if you're interested again in this space, would like to come and see who's playing there, who are these impact investors, what are these social ventures, I absolutely encourage you to check that out. So Social Finance Forum, just go on the Mars site under events, and you can find that there.
Just a few other sources of financing, especially when you're starting out. There are great programs here. It's great to be an entrepreneur in Canada and Ontario specifically. We do try to encourage that. And so we've put up some ideas on where you might go for some initial grant funding. The one thing to sort of remember as you look at both sort of the proof of principle programs as well as the NRC IRAP grants are they oftentimes will need to have some sort of contribution from you in either cash or in kind in order to match what the government's going to offer you.
On the bottom, so Ontario has the Ontario Trillium Foundation. It used to be lottery funds, but it's not that anymore. It's general revenues. They give out about $120 million every year in grants. you don't have to pay it back. So if you're a nonprofit organization or a charitable organization, you can apply to the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and you can go on their website and see what the criteria are. J.W. McConnell Family Foundation is our largest national family foundation. They do amazing things in this space, and they're our partners in the social innovation work that we do here at Mars. Most of you know about the Gates Foundation, lots of stuff primarily in international development, but they also work closely with another organization affiliated with Mars, Grand Challenges Canada. And they do very interesting stuff. If you've got something you're thinking about in the international development space. And then I mentioned Imagine Canada before, and they've got that resource, the Grant Connect, so there's tons of stuff there. And then we have a quote for you.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Branson's obviously someone who's both interested in building really successful businesses, but also doing good in the world, and he's got a good friend, Al Gore, there. And I think Allyson and I would like to leave you with the message that no matter what you do, be passionate, do what you like and what you enjoy, and you will likely succeed.
Yeah,
it's the best advice you can get.
That's right. It's a hard journey, entrepreneurship. It can be incredibly rewarding, but it's incredibly hard. If you don't love it, don't do it. And so now we've left some time for you guys to ask us some questions. So please use the mics that are available for you. And Gina, is that okay if we just turn it over to the audience? Great. And this is how you can contact us. We're both around. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question back to the beginning of your presentation regarding different types of corporations, non-profit versus the traditional corporation. Are you able to have both of them coexist at the same time under the same umbrella, under the same company, one arm acting as the profit raising, one arm acting as towards the cause? Or do you actually need that? Or you can only have one company and have a non-profit arm which would deal with those sources, government, grant providers, and stuff like that, and then continue like that?
Yep. So yeah, the answer, you can do both, but you have to be very careful in terms of separate boards of directors and the relationship between the boards. But for example, that Free the Children organization is the nonprofit with this affiliation with their for-profit arm, which is Me to We. And do you want to talk about Mars?
Yeah, I mean, Mars is a charity, but there are certain parts of Mars that have for-profit. So the Jolt Fund was actually raised with independent investors, but there is some board connections between the fund and Mars itself, because Mars delivers the program. And so there are ways where we look, although each of those do have technically separate companies. In Canada, that's pretty much the only way you can do it. The B Corp is a little bit of a hybrid where you can actually embed your social mission, but you really are a for-profit business still.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned about how the two boards deal with each other, is there a minimum required number for the board of directors or the founding members for a nonprofit organization? That's 3.
Yeah.
But for the traditional corporations, for-profit can be as
It can be as low as 1.
low as one.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep, thank you. I would really suggest you start with one though, right? Pick one and do it well, and then you can either add
Add
the
the other.
for-profit or the not-profit as needed. Pick one and get started. Anyone else?
So it seems to me like the topic of your talk is mostly non-for-profit, sort of social enterprises stuff. And what I'm curious about is how do new charities establish themselves, or what? Like I can see a lot of challenges for new charities because there is so many things out there already, like huge banks supporting certain medical institutions, let's say, and stuff like that. There are already a lot of charities. So how do new charities distinguish themselves, and how do they come up with funding that they, at the time when they have done nothing essentially yet, or something like that?
Yeah. So we've tried to talk about different types of entrepreneurship, right? So we've tried to talk about everything from products to services to consulting. And then I've talked about my job is in the more in the social purpose space. And so you start a charity the way you start another a regular organization. There's about 160,000 in Canada. There's a lot of nonprofits and charities. And you have to be passionate about what it is you're doing. In Canada, we have a pretty antiquated charity law. It's hundreds of years old. And so it has to be focused really around the relief of poverty, education. So there are very specific charitable objects in this country. And if you meet one of those, you can establish a charity with these 3 board members, and then it's up to you to go figure out how to get the money by applying to any of those organizations that we listed. But they're going to have you have to have a track record. So that's why a lot of people, again, even in the nonprofit space, start off with just volunteers. Most charitable organizations in this country are run only by volunteers. Only by volunteers. And then as they grow, they can hire the first staff person and so on and so on. And that's how that works. But you really do have to differentiate yourself. You're right. There's a lot of stuff. It's a very busy space.
Yeah, although I would argue that business is a very busy space as well. So if you have a good idea, sometimes you'll look at it from a different perspective, and you may have a new approach to do that. I mean, obviously the Kielburgers entered the space quite late and have been very, very successful to scale their operation.
Sure, absolutely. There's more charities coming on all the time. It's absolutely, it's busy space for profit, busy space not for profit. Hi.
Sorry, we have a quick question by the webcast one of our webcast participants. What is the current legal framework in Ontario for B Corps, and could you please direct us to whom to approach for B Corp registration?
So if you go on the Mars Centre for Impact Investing, we're a B Corp hub for Canada. You can find out a lot of information about B Corps. There is, like I said, about 110 in Canada right now, and it's not a legal structure, it's a certification. It's a set of ISO-like standards, so you can't incorporate as a B Corp. You have to be incorporated as a for-profit, but if you go through those standards, you can actually get the B Corp certification. And it's easier to get in Canada than it is in lots of other places, because it's things like, you have to have a good maternity leave practice. Well, that's law in Canada, so it's pretty easy for us to tick that box, that kind of thing. You have to score 80 out of 200, so it's not overly onerous, particularly for Canadians. Should we go to the back? Yep.
So I wanted to ask about the differences between government grants and non-governmental grants. And so whatever comes from government, is it in the form of a grant, or can it be investment from the government? In either case, how are they different to non-governmental?
Yeah. And so you need to look at the individual program. There are some government funds. We actually have one here at Mars called the Investment Accelerator Fund, which is essentially a fund that the province of Ontario created. So it's all government money, and it comes in the form of an investment that you would pay back. Then there are other programs like the IRAP grant that would not be repayable. And so you get both. As far as non-government grants, those would typically come from not-for-profit organizations for doing some work that might be related to their mission, or it could be an individual.
Mm-hmm. That generally goes to the nonprofit space. There's all those individual donations and things, but you generally have to be not-for-profit or even charitable in that space. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of government grants. The majority of them are just grants, but Kerri's absolutely right. There are others that are in the form of equity, but it's through a third party usually. Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you could talk a bit about the drawbacks of crowdfunding.
The drawbacks.
Kerri knows a lot about this space.
I assume we're going to talk about product crowdfunding, because right now it's not legal to do equity crowdfunding here in Canada or in Ontario, but hopefully soon, since I've been on a task force for 2 years, I'm hoping it will happen sometime soon. I think the drawbacks can be if you haven't actually planned your campaign and really thought about it as a marketing initiative, and you fail publicly online and people see that, that's obviously can be a downfall. And so I think a lot of people think, oh, you just put it up there and the work is done, but you really need to, just like anything when you're trying to attract an audience, you need to drive the audience to it, set reasonable goals so you can exceed them, and there's great resources. So we do have some people from Indiegogo that actually work out of here, Mars, and they can be quite helpful in crafting the campaign. I think there's just certain products as well that lend itself very well. So a product that can easily be understood from a video or a drawing is probably going to do a little better than something that's more complicated to understand. So those are the things that I see are the drawbacks.
I think we're getting to the stage where we can actually pull some best practices now in terms of what works and what doesn't. Certainly couldn't do that a few years ago, but there's lots of stuff on this now. Yeah, and some of the stuff that Kerri just mentioned.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, so I work for a small charity-based chair at Mars, so I'm fairly familiar with some of the kind of antiquated laws and CRA rules that put constraints on organizations like ours. So I was wondering what you guys saw of the kind of future of this charitable sector, and how those laws might impact the kind of growth of that sector, and if maybe we'll see more social enterprises where we would have seen charities in the past, some more kind of nonprofits and for-profits with the social cause rather than like the classic charity.
Yeah, I think that that's how it's going. But I have to be very clear, and Kerri made a good point around this. Lots of times people establish charities because they're passionate. They lost someone to cancer, right? Or so you have like the Terry Fox situation. And again, you know, that's hugely, hugely successful. And people will do it, they don't even need money because they're passion driven. And so I don't think we're ever gonna lose that, and I don't think we ever should, because it's part of a civil society. And Canada's great because we have all these charities and nonprofits. So I just wanna be super clear on that. But I absolutely see a trend to more social enterprises and revenue generating and blended values. And it used to be, you know, corporations were evil, you never wanted to work with them, but now people are saying, listen, I gotta figure out the system and I gotta work with it. I've spent this entire week at a collective impact summit, and I'll be back there tomorrow, and people are saying these kind of things. Very traditional charity partners are saying, we've got to figure out how to work together more effectively. And that's like saying, you know, I need business skills to do my charity better, and business is saying, I need to understand community and social license to operate and all of that stuff. I'm actually very excited about the blended value world. I'm done with bifurcation.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Quick question by webcast, Allyson and Kerri. For NRC IRAP funding, there are specific accounting rules which apply, and I assume there are similar rules for several other government programs. Are there tools available to help startups with setting up accounting systems without needing to go to a CPA?
Well, we have lots of stuff on the toolkit that could
Yeah,
probably
there should
help
be
with
some
that.
stuff out on the toolkit that would talk about that. Yes, you need to keep track of things, but I think if you can work a spreadsheet and, you know, obviously set up a payroll, because most of the time the grants want you to pay people through a payroll system, then you usually can meet their requirements, because most of the money they actually will grant on is labor. And so it shouldn't be overly complicated to need an accountant.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's really there, you have to remember all the time the level of accountability that government has. And so anytime you do take government grants, it's there, or any kind of grants actually, there's lots of strings attached to it, because they have an accountability not to shareholders, but to us as citizens, right? So there is also the accountability in the foundation world to either family, like the McConnell situation, or whatever that is. So you do have to play the game. So, you know, figure out how to do that. So we'll go to the back and then to you, sir. Yeah.
Hi there. What are some things that new nonprofits or charities can do to sort of remove the stigma which comes with being in the charity business, whereas people don't know where their money is going? And sort of follow up to that, at what point does a nonprofit become so profitable that it stops becoming a nonprofit? Breast cancer awareness specifically.
Yeah. Both great questions. The answer to the first one, I think, is transparency. And there is, again, a huge trend to putting everything online and doing whatever you can around making all your financials transparent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The part of the antiquated nature of CRA is that nonprofits can't intentionally make a profit. Zoinks. Like, what, you know, it's seriously, like, so there is some real challenge around that. And there are times when organizations like, you know, breast cancer foundations or those that have been really successful, they have to just make sure that that money goes for charitable purposes, right? So it's got to be the flow through. And if they can show that, if they can demonstrate that transparency, then they're usually okay. I mean, it's not about making the shareholders rich, right? It's about enhancing the mission of the organization. As long as they can demonstrate that flow, then they're usually okay. I've never seen a charity close because they were too successful. Right? Thanks. Hi.
If the feds in Ontario have very antiquated laws, and Mars has both a sector that deals with entrepreneurship and innovation, and they have a government sector group, is there any initiative that Mars is looking to do where the two sectors come together and act in a way of advocacy, providing standards, giving government at all levels, not just federal and provincial, but also municipal, some guidelines in terms of, well, how can they help change things for the better for charities and eventually for entrepreneurs?
Thank you. We certainly work with a huge variety of partners in that space. Imagine Canada, again, whom I mentioned, is doing a lot of advocacy in this space. And I really think it is incumbent upon groups like Mars to that voice of advocacy. And so the latest, remember I showed that picture of social finance? So Ronald Cohen, there was a G8 Commission task force on impact investing. Part of the work that we did was addressing exactly this issue at the federal level, because if we're not speaking out, then who will be? So that's the kind of work we're
And this
trying to do.
lady speaks out really well and articulately on behalf of the sector, regularly on behalf of Mars to the government. And I'm hoping they will listen to her and make some changes.
I'm a little bit annoyed. I mean, persistent. Thank you for your question.
All right.
Good.
We
Good.
have one last. We'll
One last
wrap up with a question from our webcast participants. How do we evaluate the funding trade-off between going not-for-profit or for-profit route, and how do you strike the right balance between innovative technology and social impact in order to secure funds for starting a profit company?
Yep. That's the
mouthful.
work. I mean, that is the work. And you have to you fall somewhere on this mission first, money first kind of spectrum. It's challenging to make every decision based on both. And so it's one of those learn by doing kind of things. You're here, you're learning by doing, you're practicing, you're figuring it out. And it's a wonderful question. It's got lots of complexity.
Right.
And all I can say is get in and try it.
The pragmatist in me says, go where you actually think you may have the highest opportunity to secure the funding you need to do it. And then I think if you really are chasing that blended proposition, you probably can ultimately get to where you're going to go.
Yeah.
And so if you really believe that you have a better audience with donors and grants to get you started, then take that route. If you think that really your product's more commercial and more likely to be successful with consumers first, then do that. And I think it's not black and white by any means. It's very gray, but I would be practical and see where I could get the money to get going if I was passionate about what I wanted to do.
And we actually wrote a white paper. We commissioned a white paper with a really wonderful charity lawyer named Susan Mannering, and it's available on our website on choosing your corporate structure. And it helps people assess which corporate structure is the right choice for the end product that they're trying to deliver. Right, so hopefully you'll, if you're interested or questioning this, you can have a look at that white paper and feel free to comment on it and make it better.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much, Kerri and Allyson. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.